man was sitting beside his dying wife. He was not ill. He had no fever, no medication, no medical emergency of any kind. And then, without warning, he left his body too. He described the same tunnel, the same light, the same figures waiting at the end. His wife described the same structural experience from her side, independently, without prior communication, with details that matched. He was not dying. He had simply been close enough to someone who was. And what he described, along with over 100 other documented witnesses in peer-reviewed research, has no accepted neurological explanation. Raymond Moody is the man who coined the term near-death experience in 1975. His book, Life After Life, permanently changed the direction of consciousness research. He spent the next 35 years collecting something he hadn't expected to find. Not just accounts from people who almost died. Accounts from people standing right beside them, who had no medical reason to experience anything at all. In 2010, Moody published Glimpses of Eternity, a structured collection of over 100 documented shared death experiences, gathered across decades of research. The accounts came from nurses, doctors, hospice workers, family members, people with no spiritual background and no prior belief in any afterlife. They describe the same structural elements, independently, across different countries, different cultures, and different decades. And what they described raises a question that neuroscience currently has no answer for. If near-death experiences are produced by a dying brain, then why are healthy people, standing beside the dying person, sometimes reporting the same structural experience?
Now I need you to hold this fact in your mind, because it changes everything that follows. The standard scientific explanation for near-death experiences, the one taught in medical schools, but one most neurologists default to, is that they are produced by the dying brain. Oxygen deprivation, neurochemical changes, the brain misfiring as it shuts down, producing vivid experiences that feel real because the brain, under extreme physiological stress, is capable of generating extremely convincing internal states. This is a coherent, scientifically grounded explanation. And for a single person undergoing cardiac arrest, it is difficult to rule out. But here is the problem. The shared death experience doesn't involve a dying brain on the witness's side. The husband, sitting beside his dying wife, his brain is receiving full oxygen. His heart is beating normally. His neurochemistry is not under any kind of extreme physiological stress. By the dying brain hypothesis, he should experience nothing. Think about what you are being asked to accept here. If a vivid experience requires a brain in physiological crisis to produce it, then what produced the structurally identical experience in the healthy brain, sitting 3 feet away? The cases Moody documented are not vague. They are specific, and they follow a pattern that repeats across independent accounts in ways that are difficult to explain as coincidence.
In Glimpses of Eternity, Moody documents one of the most frequently cited cases in shared death research, a physician who was present at his own mother's death. He was not ill. He was a practicing medical doctor with no prior belief in NDEs and a professional skepticism towards supernatural claims. And here is where it gets impossible to dismiss. He described the room changing around him, a warmth and light that did not come from any fixture, a sensation of partial elevation, as if the boundary between his physical location and somewhere else had briefly shifted, and an awareness of something beyond the room that he later described as the most real experience of his entire medical career. His mother died during this window, Moody cross-referenced his account against the structural elements reported by cardiac arrest survivors who had described their own NDEs, patients this physician had never met, whose accounts he had never read. The structural elements matched. The warmth, the light, the sensation of transition, the awareness beyond the physical room. I want you to sit with this for a moment. This was not a patient whose brain was shutting down. This was a trained medical professional whose brain was functioning normally, who described structural elements consistent with near-death experience accounts while standing beside someone who was dying. But the pattern goes further than a single case. Across Moody's 100-plus documented accounts and across the structured research that followed, witnesses included hospice nurses who reported the room filling with light at the moment of a patient's death, family members who described a sensation of brief elevation they had no framework to explain, medical professionals who reported the same structural sequence, warmth, light, a sense of transition, independently, without communication with each other, in separate documented accounts. The consistency of that structure across witnesses with no shared belief system, no prior exposure to NDE literature, and no medical reason to generate any altered experience is what makes this category of evidence genuinely difficult to dismiss.
Now I need to address the most obvious counter-argument directly, because it is the strongest one, and ignoring it would undermine everything else in this video.
The skeptic's argument goes like this. Grief is a powerful psychological state. People watching a loved one die are under extreme emotional stress. Is it possible that what witnesses described were psychological responses to grief? Vivid emotional experiences produced by a stressed but otherwise healthy brain, rather than any kind of genuine shared perception? This is a serious objection, and I want to be precise about what it can and cannot explain. It can plausibly explain some elements: the sense of presence, the emotional intensity, the feeling of light. Grief and extreme emotional states are documented to produce vivid perceptual experiences in otherwise healthy people. Here is what it struggles to explain. The cases involving multiple independent witnesses present in the same room, giving separate accounts without prior communication, who describe identical structural details. If each witness is independently generating an experience through their own grief response, the probability of those independent experiences containing the same specific structural sequence, the same warmth, the same direction, the same awareness, becomes a question that requires a specific answer, not a general one. Dr. William Peters, founder of the Shared Crossing Research Initiative, has been collecting and studying shared death experience accounts in a structured research format since 2013. His findings have been published in the American Journal of Hospice and Palliative Medicine and the Omega Journal of Death and Dying. Peters does not claim this proves survival of consciousness. What he states in his published research is more specific. The shared death experience represents a genuine, recurring, cross-cultural phenomenon that current psychological and neurological models do not adequately account for, and that the structural consistency of accounts across independent witnesses warrants serious scientific investigation. That is not a researcher telling you what happens after death. That is a researcher saying something is happening in these rooms at the moment of death that our current models cannot fully explain, and it is being witnessed by people whose brains have no physiological reason to be generating it.
Subscribe, because next week we go to the man who started this entire field of research, the physician who coined the term near-death experience, the book that changed everything, and the specific category of evidence from his own decades of research that he said publicly he could never fully explain away. That case is next. You already know something most people spend their whole lives avoiding. That is not nothing. That is the beginning.